So picture this. You walk into like a specialty pet store, right?
Right, the classic weekend trip for any hobbyist.
Exactly. And you're staring at this tank full of pale, sort of muted, grayish fish. And honestly, your human brain just instantly dismisses them. You figured, they're the runts of the litter.
Oh, absolutely. The rejected batch that didn't really make the cut.
Yeah. But now imagine pulling out your phone and an AI basically taps you on the shoulder to tell you that your human eyes and like all the aesthetic biases that come with them are completely wrong.
It's a huge reality check. You aren't looking at rejects at all. You're actually looking at this biological marvel that's just hidden in plain sight.
And that weird intersection, right, between human perception, technology, and biology is exactly what we're exploring today. Welcome to the deep dive.
It's great to be here to dig into this one.
So today we are pulling from this incredibly detailed, honestly charming corner of the internet. We've got a blog post dated May 5th, 2026.
It's titled Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 249, right?
Yes, by a really dedicated enthusiast named Ang. And our mission for you today in this deep dive is to explore the meticulous, kind of crazy world of fish breeding and identification.
And really to unpack what this one hobbyist's thought process reveals about, the friction between curiosity and physical space.
Yeah, the sheer challenge of a niche passion. Okay, let's unpack this, because Ang's journey starts exactly with that moment of aesthetic bias we just talked about.
Right, looking at the pale fish and just making a snap judgment.
And I immediately thought of this analogy. Like if you were a huge music fan and you're digging through a crate of records and you stumble on the unlabeled B-sides of a famous album.
Oh yeah, like without the glossy cover art or the marketing.
Exactly. Without all that flash, you might initially think, oh, these are just the studio rejects. And Ang literally assumes these fish are a rejected batch of some other variety.
Which is funny because rainbow fish aren't even usually at the top of Ang's list to begin with.
Right, but a good breeding challenge is always tempting.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that human assumption. We naturally equate vibrancy with health,
Oh, for sure. Like bright colors mean good genetics.
Exactly. Ang looks at these pale fish, and the brain applies a shortcut lack of color equals lower quality. But the AI tool Ang uses, it doesn't have that prejudice at all.
It doesn't care if the fish is pretty.
Right. It analyzes the morphological data, so fin shape, body depth, subtle pixel patterns, and it identifies this pale group as either juvenile or female Boeseman's rainbowfish.
The scientific name is Melanotaenia boesemani, I think.
Yep, that's the one. And it just completely shatters that initial human hypothesis.
I have to ask about that dynamic, though. Isn't it kind of amazing that human bias, like seeing muted colors and assuming rejects, has to be corrected by AI?
It really is. We rely so heavily on our visual heuristics, but nature doesn't operate on human aesthetic standards.
Right. Nature operates on survival.
Yeah.
But does the algorithm just solve the whole puzzle right there? Because if the app just hands you the answer, that feels a little, hollow.
For a dedicated hands-on hobbyist, yeah, it would be.
Right. It feels like the mystery is artificially truncated.
Well, that is a crucial distinction, and it's exactly why Ang doesn't just stop at the AI's output.
Oh, so they actually verify it.
Exactly. The AI provided the clue, but Ang still uses traditional empirical observation to confirm the truth.
Oh, so.
So Ang physically walks over to another rack in the same fish store where there's a tank of mature, fully developed boesemani.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. By comparing the AI suggestion against the physical reality of a mature tank, Ang realizes that this pale group is mostly females.
So it's like a synthesis of modern machine learning and old-school hands-on verification.
Precisely. The AI is a compass, but you still have to walk the trail yourself.
I love that. And once Ang establishes what these fish actually are, the narrative naturally moves deeper into the biology, right?
Right. We transition from just identifying the species to deciphering this intense visual disparity between the individuals.
Because now we have to decode the genders. And according to Ang's notes, distinguishing gender in this specific species is wildly straightforward.
It really is. It's due to extreme sexual dimorphism. The males and females look drastically, profoundly different.
Yeah, break that down for us. What do the males look like?
So the males sport this highly distinctive half-and-half look. They have a deep bluish front and a bright orange rear.
Oh, wow. So really flashy.
Very flashy. Plus, their morphology is different. They have longer, much more pointed dorsal and anal fins.
Okay, so to carry our visual analogy forward, it's as if the males are showing up to a party wearing this highly tailored, flashy, two-tone neon tuxedo.
That is a perfect way to describe it.
But frankly, looking at this biologically, doesn't that make the males massive targets in the wild? Like, why would nature design a fish that acts as a glowing neon sign for predators?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are hitting on the core engine of evolutionary biology.
The neon tuxedo is a biological flex, basically.
Exactly. It's a concept known as the handicap principle. The male is broadcasting to the females, like, look at how genetically robust and healthy I am.
Right, I can swim around in bright orange and still not get eaten.
Exactly. I can afford to be this visible, and I'm still fast enough and smart enough to survive. The vibrant colors are fueled by their diet and health.
So a dull male is a genetically weak male.
Precisely. Extreme color is proof of absolute fitness.
Which brings us to the females. Ang describes them as having a much more slender build, shorter fins, and they stick strictly to those subtle grayish tones.
Right, the pale ones from the first tank.
Exactly. So while the males are in the bright orange and blue tuxedo, the females are wearing like a highly practical, subtle gray tracksuit.
A very practical tracksuit, yeah. And the evolutionary mechanism there is completely different, but just as vital.
Because they carry the biological investment, right?
The eggs. They are the reproductive bottleneck of the species, so their survival is paramount. They don't need to prove their fitness with flashy colors.
They just need to stay alive long enough to deposit the eggs.
Exactly. So the muted gray tones provide essential camouflage against the riverbed and aquatic plants.
Which completely recontextualizes Ang's initial confusion. Like, when Ang first looked at that tank and saw pale fish, they weren't looking at rejects at all.
No, they were looking at the foundational survival mechanism of the species.
That's incredible. The visual disparity is profound because the genders have entirely different evolutionary survival strategies.
Precisely. And understanding that survival mechanism naturally leads a dedicated hobbyist like Ang to the next logical puzzle.
Right, the ultimate question for any fish keeper. Should I breed them?
Exactly. We transition from just looking at the fish to engineering their environment. Breeding is the ultimate logistical puzzle.
Because you aren't just keeping an animal alive in a box of water anymore.
Right. You're attempting to recreate their natural conditions so flawlessly that their biological imperatives just take over.
And for the Boeseman's rainbowfish, Ang notes that the ideal breeding setup is a harem tank.
Yes, a harem tank.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Ang specifically outlines a ratio for this harem tank. It's 1 male to 2 or 3 females.
Yep, 1 to 3 is standard.
Now, I'm trying to visualize this practically. You have one hyper-aggressive, showy male who is hardwired to constantly court in a closed glass box with females.
Right.
Aren't you just concentrating an immense amount of energy in a really confined space?
Yeah.
How does that 1 to 3 ratio actually function without exhausting everybody?
Well, that is exactly why the ratio is so specific. In a closed aquarium, a 1-to-1 ratio is actually terrible.
Really? Why?
Because that single male will direct 100% of his relentless courtship energy at that one single female.
Oh, and she would just get completely stressed out.
Exhausted, yeah.
Yeah.
By using a harem tank with a 1 to 3 ratio, you are artificially diffusing the male's attention.
Oh, that makes sense. He courts one, she retreats, he moves to the next.
Exactly. It is a spatial management strategy designed to balance out the energy dynamics.
But the spatial management doesn't stop at the ratio, does it? It dictates the physical architecture of the tank itself.
It does. Ang points out a distinct contrast in the environmental design.
Right, because a lot of people might be familiar with breeding cichlid species, which demand, like, artificial caves.
Right. Cichlids love caves. But Boeseman's rainbowfish need something entirely different. They prefer dense aquatic plants.
Or, alternatively, a spawning mop.
Yes, the infamous spawning mop.
Which is so funny. It sounds like a piece of household cleaning equipment repurposed as an underwater nursery.
It kind of is. It's basically a thick bundle of synthetic yarn suspended in the water to mimic fine-leaved plants.
Okay, but the best part is what this reminds Ang of. Reading the notes, the mention of this spawning mop triggers a brilliantly mundane realization.
It does. Ang remembers an actual unused mop that they bought many moons ago.
And completely forgot what fish species it was even intended for.
Exactly.
Right.
Which highlights the humor in Ang's meticulousness. You have a hobbyist who understands the evolutionary biology of extreme sexual dimorphism.
Who understands the energy mechanics of a harem tank.
But who also has a random piece of synthetic yarn sitting in a closet and cannot remember why they bought it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah.
But I feel like it raises an important question about the psychology of the long-term hobbyist.
It really does. You accumulate vast amounts of theoretical knowledge and you hoard these highly specialized physical artifacts like the mop.
Just in case you build that specific microhabitat someday.
Exactly. And if the project never actually materializes in the physical world.
Which brings us perfectly to the grand finale of Eng's blog post. So what does this all mean? We've decoded the visual markers. The neon tuxedo males, the gray tracksuit females.
We've mentally engineered the perfect harem tank.
We've dug the spawning mop out of the closet. We have solved the puzzle completely. And then...
Eng just walks away.
Yes, it's the ultimate hilarious anticlimax. After all that research and discovery, the answer is just, nah.
It really highlights this fascinating friction between intellectual curiosity and resource allocation.
Right, because Eng cites two very distinct practical reasons for abandoning the project. The first is simply a lack of physical space.
Eng takes a hard look at their current environment, their tanks and ponds, and realizes there is zero real estate left.
Passion and curiosity are infinite, but physical tank space is strictly finite.
This raises an important question about the discipline of the hobbyist. You can build mental habitats on the internet forever, but in the physical world, an aquarium is a heavy, fixed footprint.
It requires electrical filtration, temperature regulation, daily maintenance.
Exactly. The mind can hold 1,000 ecosystems, but your floorboards can only support a few.
It takes so much restraint. Most people, once they solve the puzzle and buy the gear, feel this overwhelming compulsion to just execute it.
Right, to actually set it up.
So choosing not to, because you respect the limits of your physical space, shows real mastery over the obsession.
It really does. You have to have the restraint to say, I enjoyed the mental exercise, but I do not have the logistical bandwidth.
But then there's the second constraint, which is just brutally, refreshingly honest.
Oh, the aesthetic veto.
Yes. After all this deep analysis of genetic fitness and evolutionary marvels, Eng admits that, aesthetically, they just aren't a fan of how rainbowfish look anyway.
Which is the ultimate reality check. You can respect the biology, but an aquarium is a massive, glowing, visual focal point in your home.
If you're going to stare at it every day and clean it every week, you better actually like looking at the fish. It's like, I spent all afternoon learning your mating habits, but honestly, your neon tuxedo just isn't my style. Best of luck out there.
It perfectly separates the thrill of the intellectual chase from the daily grind of maintenance.
Absolutely. So, to bring this all together for you listening, we have unpacked an incredible amount of biology and psychology from what basically started as a simple diary entry.
A quick trip to the fish store, yeah.
Right. We started with assuming muted fish were rejects. We saw AI step in to correct human aesthetic prejudice. We learned about the flashy half-and-half males and the subtle females.
We engineered harem tank setups and discussed spawning mops.
And finally, we hit the harsh realities of running out of tank space and just not liking the vibe of the fish.
It's a masterclass in the life cycle of a hobbyist's obsession.
It really is.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought that builds purely on the text.
Okay, what is it?
So Eng mentions checking their tanks and their ponds. Plural.
Ah, yes. The outdoor ponds.
Right. We've spent this entire time talking about glass boxes inside a house. But I want you to ponder what the leap from indoor glass tanks to outdoor ponds says about the escalating scale of a hobbyist's devotion.
It's a massive escalation.
It is. When does a contained hobby spill over into literally terraforming your living space?
That's a great point. It represents a fundamental shift. You stop living in a home that happens to have a fish tank in the corner.
And you start living inside a massive biological facility that you just happen to sleep in.
The hobby stops being an activity and becomes your entire environment.
Exactly. At what point does the keeper become completely enveloped by the habitats they create? It's a fine line between keeping a hobby and the hobby keeping you.
A very fine line.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the B-sides of the pet store and the fascinating realities of environmental design.
It was a fun one.
We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view the hidden intricacies of your own hobbies, whatever they might be. We'll be right back here next time to unpack something entirely new.